Hi, Dave. Thank you
Hi.
for meeting with us.
I'm here to sell Apollo salt.
Give us
It
your
grinds.
pitch. Yeah.
It's from the sea.
Does it connect to the internet?
It's very salty.
But it doesn't connect to the internet.
Doesn't,
So
no.
no place here for it.
Yeah, there's no IoT play for it.
So, okay, as we were talking before I started rolling, you've been here quite a few times at ISE.
This is my third one, yeah.
Third one.
Yeah.
Do you notice any sort of trends when it comes to what's being shown at the conference? Any sort of...
Well, first there's a lot more people. I think it's grown by about 20,000 people in the 3 years that I've been coming, and a lot more LED than there was 2 years ago, or my first one, where there was a reasonable number of fine pitch LED companies, but now that's exploded. There's whole halls of it, and even just walking over to your booth today, came around a corner and there's some company I've never heard of in the middle of unified communications booths trying to do, market their fine pitch LED products. So there's so many companies that it can't even all be hived in the same hall. So that would be the big thing. There's a gazillion interactive whiteboard companies.
Saw that, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost as bad as digital signage companies.
So that's my next question, actually,
Yeah.
digital signage companies. Specifically, maybe conference room signs. I know that you run the website.
Meetingroomsigns.biz,
Yeah.
yep.
And there was this, in the last 2 years, let's say, this big sort of boom of conference room signs that went, from 15 available to I don't know how many.
There would I track about 65, something like that, and I know there are more than that. I just can't stay on top of them all. I mean, it makes sense to me, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about it is, particularly for digital signage companies who expand into this, is I kind of call it the gateway drug.
Right.
That you can sell them into conference room signs, and at some point, if they use it and they're happy with the vendor, they can expand into other areas, and they'll be asking that vendor, could you also do a sign that rolls up all the different meeting rooms, who's in each, in terms of availability, like your premium product has.
Right.
And then they can go into like video walls and all sorts of things like that. The downside is a lot of those companies who are pure play digital signage companies kind of get something working in terms of meeting room signs, but they're not focused on it.
Right.
So their product quite often isn't all that robust and really doesn't understand the market, and it's one of the things they have versus the thing they do, which I think the pure play guys have a real advantage there, and the ones that are just focused on meeting room signs.
I was at the Smart Building Conference on Monday, and there was a lot of discussion about building the smart or creating the smart building with the user in mind, not just stacking something on, but basically evolving the product so that it truly serves a purpose.
Yeah.
Do you see that in meeting room signs and also meeting room technology as a whole?
Yeah, I've seen a few companies who are using sensors at a very root level, sensors that are just turning things on when people approach the meeting room sign, recognizing who that person is, checking in, checking out. And to me, the interesting part of that is if you're using, whether they're RFID sensor or tags on badges, just like you have for access control, all those things can be rolled up into analytics, so you can start to understand how many people are using a meeting room and start to right size your office space. So if you know that you've got a meeting room for 16 people and on average 3 people are there for meetings at any given time, you don't need a meeting room that big, so maybe you do 4 meeting rooms or 1 6-person meeting room and 5 huddle spaces for that same physical space. So, or you just reduce the size of your office and you save, $50 a square foot.
And well, speaking of analytics, is sort of a good segue into, as we were speaking about before, the privacy issue. I know that also at the ISE here, that when I've spoken with people, and also at the Smart Building Conference, a lot of care is being given to this sense of protecting the user, protecting the user's data. Do you think that's something that maybe the companies are not paying enough attention to, or what's your take on that?
I don't totally know how much attention companies pay to it. I would imagine they should, but I would say for the most part, end users Probably don't care that much about individual data and tracking individuals around a building and how much they're using things. I think they'd be more interested in the aggregated anonymous data about overall usage and patterns of use, which days are busy, all those sorts of things.
Do you think the marketplace is quite segmented at the moment in terms of, as you spoke about before, well, if we go back to meeting room signage or digital signage in offices, I do get a feeling that everybody's sort of doing their own thing and not trying to make it compatible with all the equipment, maybe not from them, maybe by another manufacturer. I know that one of our goals is to sort of have a product that will integrate with everything else that you have and seamlessly sort of fit into what you have. What do you think about, do companies pay enough attention to that? Not speaking about us, but like in general.
I certainly coach anybody if I'm working with a vendor to say you absolutely have to be integrated with the systems that your customers use. Whether you're working in the fast food industry in QSR, you need to have APIs and everything else so that you can tap into their point of sale system, their food management system, everything else. And I worked recently with an auto manufacturer for the manufacturing floor. They had digital signage throughout their floor and they wanted a different vendor because the current one they weren't happy with for a number of reasons. But I was talking about you've got all these systems reporting how your robotics are working, how many cars are coming off the line per hour and all those sorts of things. Do you want that on these screens as well? And they were a little like, not sure, but it had simply to do with that sounds complicated, but it really doesn't have to be.
Right.
And it's so much easier now because a lot of systems kind of expose and share that data without making it publicly available or anything. See, and there are lots of APIs and data connectors that are written that make it possible to pretty easily reflect something that on somebody's computer, on a dashboard that says, here's our percentage level right now. You could easily visualize that into a graphical chart that anybody at a glance can see and appreciate. So you can see how you're performing and everything else, and it can be dynamic through things like HTML5 and JavaScripting. So you can see how we're doing and how things are trending and everything else in real time, which to me is kind of state-of-the-art digital signage.
Right. So thank you so much for the very in-depth interview.